But basically, as you can see from the introductory sort of summary page at the front of the report, it's our intention to issue an unqualified, which is a clean opinion on the financial statements, and the Auditor General, all being well and subject to your approval, which is obviously your decision today, will then certify the accounts next week. I'll take you through the main body of the report now, but that's like the headline message, really. In terms of progress, there's a section there on progress, which refers to the fact that we have substantially completed the audit, which we have. I'm pleased to confirm that. And paragraph 6 then refers to our ongoing internal quality review work being outstanding. That is still outstanding, largely because some of the adjustments that were put through late in the version of the accounts that went through late yesterday afternoon, we are still working through. You know, we still at the stage of confirming we are happy with those adjustments, and then we've got to sort of undertake the review with those adjustments. We've got to satisfy ourselves that those adjustments are correct and appropriate and as expected. To date, we are happy. I think I can confirm that. That work is still ongoing. So I just need to make that important point there, really, that if you do decide to approve the accounts today, it will be on that basis, on the expectation that we will be satisfied that those adjustments that were made yesterday afternoon are satisfactory. Just to reiterate the point, we are still working through them, but to date, we're okay, if you know what I mean. I'm happy to take any questions on that, by the way. Shall I stop there for the moment, because before I go into the rest of the report?
Yeah, do any members have any queries or comments on what they've heard so far? No, I think that's fine if you want to carry on.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The report goes on to talk about COVID-19. It wouldn't surprise you whatsoever to understand that the pandemic had a huge impact across all our audits, regardless what sector the audit, the audited body operated within. And the SRS has been absolutely no exception. I suppose the main impacts, just to give you a flavour really in terms of what the impacts are, which you probably know from your own understanding anyway, in terms of what's going on at your own council bodies. But audit deadlines have been subject to slippage. There's been a bit of movement there, a bit more flexibility. The other adjustment then, other impact rather, has been in regard to actual changes to the financial statements. There's been certain disclosures that have been required. There's been certain sort of emphasis on our audit work on certain areas of the accounts, particularly in regard to things like asset valuations, which I'll come on to shortly, in regard to the pension fund. And thirdly, which has been quite a radical change, really. We've all been having to undertake audits remotely, both in terms of preparation of the financial statements, us as auditors undertaking the audit and having to work together to deliver an audit. So that's been quite a challenge. But despite those challenges, I'm pleased to say the audit, as I say, is pretty much complete. We are almost there, and to be able to bring the accounts to you a little more than 2 weeks later than last year, I feel is quite an achievement, really. For all concerned, I'm not taking any glory here. The council and officers have played a big part in that. Moving on to the report, in terms of the audit opinion, I've already stated it is our intention to issue an unqualified opinion. However, we have needed to amend our opinion, and I'll briefly explain what I mean by that now. Basically, we've had to include an additional paragraph to draw attention to the fact that there is material valuation uncertainty in regard to the SRS's share of some property assets within the Cardiff and Vale Pension Fund, of which, as you will know, the SRS is a member of the Cardiff and Vale Pension Fund. So a paragraph has been included in the accounts to reflect this, and also a related emphasis of matter paragraph in our audit report. But to reassure you on this, the SRS is far from unique. This matter is having an impact on virtually every local government body across Wales, and it's purely due to the COVID-19 pandemic. As you can probably fully appreciate, there's been valuation impacts on property assets across the whole UK-wide property market, and any such investments held by the pension fund the valuers have expressed uncertainty in regard to those investment funds which relate to property assets. And as I say, that's material and valuation uncertainty. Hence, we need to sort of draw that out just within our audit report and correspondingly within the financial statements. It's still an unqualified opinion, just to reassure you on that front. And as I say, to repeat, it is a very common feature of many of our audit reports this year. If I briefly take you through the remainder of the report, just to confirm, there's no uncorrected misstatements. All adjustments have been corrected for, subject to the final check, as I just referred to, of the late adjustment that went through yesterday. And there have been a number of audit adjustments which have been identified as part of the audit process, and they are summarised in Appendix 3 of the report. The various other appendices of the report refer to the letter of representation. But by the letter of representation is basically the assurances we will expect from the Joint Committee to support the signed accounts. So if you sign the accounts today, the letter of representation will accompany those signed accounts to us and enable us to then certify the financial statements. Appendix 2 relates to the audit report. And again, this includes that wording I was referring to in regard to the emphasis of matter paragraph, the word about the pension fund valuation uncertainty. And Appendix 3, as I just refers to the summary of the most significant audit adjustments we made to the accounts as a result of our audit. To just give you a flavour as to what they all mean, they are all generally of a presentational, classification or narrative nature. So none of them have an impact on the closing position or indeed ever change the bottom line. I'll stop there. I don't think there's a great deal else I need to draw to your attention in regard to the report, but I'm very, very happy to take any questions that there might be.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And I think before we start with the questions, just want to say well done to everyone for an excellent audit report. You know, I think I speak for everyone when I say that as elected members anyway, as politicians, like, this is probably one of the best we've seen, and it's good that we've built from last year's learning as well. So I don't know if anyone's got any comments or. Yeah, Councillor Williams, Eddie.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, it's refreshing. You read a report and you open it up and you go, wow, there's a lot of pages to this. But what it does is gives the background to all the work that's been done and the detail. It's clear, and the process between the auditor and the 151 officer is clear that it's a joint working, and yeah, we're in a good position. It did raise concern with the pensions element, but that's been clarified and clear. And so I think the report is excellent, and I can concur that it's in a position to be agreed by the committee.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any comments on this report? No? Okay. Can I get
recommendations to accept the report then?
Thank you very much. Can someone second that, please? Yeah, thank you. And is I presume because everyone's raised their hands, everyone's good with that? Yep. Okay, fab. Thank you very much. It is an excellent report. And it was good to see actually that our shared internal audit service, another form of our partnership is working really well. Moving on then to item 7. Do we want to do 7, 8, 9 and 10 together? I don't know how we want to present this. Reports from the Director of Environment and Housing. Should we take one at a time or in a chunk?
Should we ask Dave?
Chair, what I'd like to do, with your blessing, is to ask Helen to present item 7, which is the business plan.
Okay.
I'll then pick up item 8, because they are interrelated.
Yeah.
Which is the annual report and a look back. Christina will then talk you through item 9, which is the food plan. And then I'll come back to you on item 10.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Helen, do you want to kick us off then?
Okay, so Helen Picton, I'm the Operational Manager for Enterprise and Specialist Services within Shared Regulatory Services. And it's great to see everyone after so many months since the last meeting. I'm going to take you quite briefly through the covering report for the SRS business plan. And the actual plan you'll find obviously in the bundle immediately after the report. So the joint working agreement requires the production of a business plan annually. And it also specifies that each year that draft business plan has to come to joint committee for approval, and then once approved, it's circulated to each participant authority's head of paid service. So as in previous years, the current draft business plan for 2020-21 reflects the corporate priorities of the three participant councils, and these are reflected through the 5 SRS strategic priorities of improving health and well-being, safeguarding the vulnerable, protecting the environment, supporting the local economy, and the underpinning one of maximising the use of resources. So you'll see that the draft business plan updates on the work of SRS in the last financial year. And then you'll be familiar with the galaxies for each of those strategic priorities, where we show how our actions turn into outcomes and then deliver on those priorities. And those actions then are set out for the coming financial year, or the current financial year. At the time of writing the business plan, the very real impact of COVID-19 on service delivery was recognised, and this is particularly pertinent, I think, at the current time when so much of our work continues to be COVID related. The draft business plan has been subject to consultation with stakeholders. Comments received have been reflected in the body of the report, and there's some examples included for you in section 2.4. So going back to the recommendations in the covering report, they are firstly for the Joint Committee to approve the SRS business plan for 2020-21, and also to authorise the head of Shared Regulatory Services to be able to make administrative amendments throughout the year to avoid the necessity for matters to be brought back to Joint Committee for some minor amendment during the course of the year. So that's taken you through quickly through the report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Councillor Mackie has a question for you, Helen. You're on mute though, Councillor Mackie.
Sorry, forgot that. Yeah, I mean, I was just wondering, you know, with everything that's happening with COVID and obviously the effect that's going to have, you know, I mean, I think it's a great report, and it's great to see how much work has been achieved as well in the last year, and what you're planning to. I think it's all fantastic. But do we realistically think some of this is going to be achieved, or you know, and what provision are we taking really to mitigate that?
Chair, can I come in and answer that as the service head?
Yes, please.
I think, Councillor, when we wrote this business plan, and we should have sat in June, and as Steve Wyndham says, COVID has caused all sorts of problems for administrations. In June, we were just coming out from under the first wave, and I think I'd have said to you, yes, it'll be a push, but I think we'll get there. Had we met on the 9th of September, I think I'd have been saying to you I could deliver quite a bit of this. And as we meet on the 29th of September, you will be aware that South Wales has gone into health restriction measures, and significant amounts of the SRS resource is now being directed into the Cardiff and Vale Health Board, working with their TTP, into the Cwmtaf Morgannwg Health Board to help them with TTP, and a whole new set of controls on business compliance, which now reach 68, which are measures that we hadn't anticipated having to be charged with delivering as well. So I think there are still parts of this business plan that we will focus upon and deliver. But at the moment we are on a risk of being a bit crass, a little bit of a wartime footing now in dealing with things as they emerge, and we are reacting. Our key partnerships are still there, public health bodies, the police and others. But there will be some things in this business plan that, unless things improve rapidly, we are going to have to put to one side. An example is the work on minimum unit pricing we were going to do for alcohol. Piece of flagship legislation for the Welsh Government, an acknowledgement from them that it isn't going to be delivered this year. There is a greater priority for us.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dave. I know Councillor Williams has also raised his hand. If you'd like to come in.
Thanks, Tanisha. Yeah, I think, Dave, you've indicated that. I was looking at the challenges on page 17, which mentions the ICT, and clearly that's been a factor in the changes that have been made. How's that progressing at the moment?
So our ICT has progressed well. We were fortunate anyway in that we were one of the services that had developed a lot in remote working, and we had that capacity to be I always kept calling it the martini workforce, anytime, any place, anywhere. And we'd had that capacity, and I think that stood us in good stead to deliver what we are doing. I have to thank publicly, if I'm being recorded, Nick Wheeler and his team at the Vale of Glamorgan's ICT, Phil Bear at Cardiff's ICT, and Martin Morgan's at Pregen, because their joint working behind the scenes has helped us to manage this COVID issue and respond effectively. So our ICT is good. I think we've learned some lessons on remote working and the use of Office 365 and all these new gadgets. But it is a piece of work that when things settle down, we will review and learn some lessons from. But generally, officers are now working remotely as they were before, working from home. And most of the calls that go out through our TTP offices are people at home. So I think it's a real testament to the way the systems have been put in place.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just one further question. I think you might have just answered that with the tobacco or the alcohol. On page 35, you were talking about resource implications of some of the work that we're having to do. The Public Health Wales Act, the new legislation. I just wondered, is that because we're being distracted with the TTP and things like that?
So very interestingly, one of our SRS officers was seconded into the Welsh Government to deliver this piece of legislation for them. Yeah. And she has been moved to work on the COVID activities, and so all the tattooing and whatever has taken a back seat. So the Welsh Government have made their own policy decision about that. The officer that we seconded to them to enable this to happen has been diverted to something else. And that just reflects where we are with the uncertainty around coronavirus. Okay,
I suppose because we are in partnership, and that we can accept that. We're all working for the same goal, shared rate services. So yeah, okay. Do you have any other resource concerns?
I think generally, and it's a number of these reports sort of interweave with each other, but getting appropriately qualified people into the roles is continuing to be a challenge. We've pretty much captured the cohort that just left Cardiff University with their environmental health qualifications. and have offered temporary positions to those in the second year at the moment. Helen is coordinating that. But still, trying to find appropriately qualified officers is a real challenge at the moment, and we're seeing it across the border in Cwmtaf, Morgannwg, in Rhondda and Taff and Merthyr. They are struggling equally, as is the rest of Wales. I think over time, some of the professions haven't been invested in the way we might have hoped by the colleges. They haven't run the courses, and we are reaping the benefits of that.
Right, okay. Okay, thanks for that.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Do we want to move on to the next report, and then I'll do the recommendations after that, or should we move this one first?
I would move this one, Chair.
Yeah, okay. So Helen outlined the recommendations, which were to note the content of the report, and then also to authorise the head of the Shared Regulatory Service to make administrative amendments to the 2020 to 2021 business plan. I don't think there were any amendments that we've made today, so I guess it's just should they arise. Is everyone, well, can I get someone to move that, please?
Yeah, move it.
Yeah, and then second, lovely. And is everyone okay with that? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Then item 8 is the Shared Regulatory Service Annual Report.
Chair, I'll take you through that briefly. If I could direct members to paragraph 2 and the key considerations that we had in mind for the 2019-2020 period. It was to deliver the business plan that you'd agreed 12 months earlier. It was to look at recruitment, retention. It was to look at agile working, and it was to look at new legislation. And I think generally I would be saying to you, we've done a good job here in the last 12 months of the last financial year. In paragraph 2.3, you can see that in terms of the officer satisfaction with working in the SRS and how they felt about things at the time, we saw a significant increase in the way in which people reflected on learning, development and the workplace that we provided. We did unfortunately see a rise in sickness absence in 2019-20, higher than we'd anticipated. But much of that happened in the last 2 quarters, and much of it was planned interventions with operations. In terms of our operational performance, the key performance indicators that are common to the councils across Wales. One is about broadly compliant for food establishments. And in paragraph 2.6, you can see that all 3 councils saw an increase in performance, albeit Bridgend had a 0.03% drop. And I think that just reflects maybe one business premise that had closed or perhaps had dropped slightly. It's negligible. But those rates are comparable now with most parts of Wales. Cardiff is a little lower, and that's because Cardiff has a significant churn and turnover of businesses and a higher number of businesses that are more ethnically diverse, shall we say. And quite often we need to have conversations about how different cultural practices interface with the food hygiene requirements. In the empty properties brought back into reuse, again, we had a good set of results there, and those are all set out in paragraph 2.6. And in 2.7, you'll see that we did engage with the Welsh Government back in 2019, and they've made a number of changes to the performance regimes around empty properties as a consequence of one of their directors, John Howells, coming out and spending time with officers in Bridgend and in Cardiff, looking to actually see what we did, which was quite a refreshing change, because John is a senior officer and he's come right to the front end to see what we deal with. So some very positive developments there. Set out in Appendix 1 then are the, excuse me, the details of the performance against all the agreed indicators. And were we in the same room, Chair, I would probably quietly walk you through those. I'm happy to do that, but conscious of time, but there's nothing there of any concern. In Appendix 2, we've set out prosecutions, and through the last year and this year, I regularly flag with you items that have attracted the court's attention, and particularly when they've delivered a significant punishment. So Appendix 2 contains all that. In terms of the rest of the report, I set out under the 5 priorities some of the significant achievements. Some of them are also in the business plan as we've looked back. And generally, operational performance has been very good. Paragraph 2.25, I would normally hand you to Claire, and I will do in a moment. Up until March, I think we were on a position to say to you we were going to deliver within budget. And in March, we took action against a man who owns a lot of horses, and we've taken possession of those, and later on we'll talk a little more about that. But that skewed our final performance. So I'm going to hand to Claire to let you hear the detail, and then I'll come back in and conclude the report, Chair, if that's all right.
Hi Dave, thanks so much. As you can see in the table in 2.25, the overall overspend within the year was 46,000, and the information contained in this report is very much mirrored in the statement of accounts. I'm not sure if you want me to go over any particular elements of the report.
No. Sorry, I think Caris has put her hand up.
No problem.
I was just going to say, Chair, if there are no actual queries on the detail of the report, just to remind members that within the joint working agreement, there is a statement that the Section 151 officers from the 3 authorities need to agree what should happen with any under or overspend in any one financial year. As Claire has already said, in paragraph 225 of this report, it outlines a net overspend for the service of 46,000, but it also details there the position for each of the individual authorities. I can confirm I've had those discussions with my colleagues, Section 151s in Bridgend and Cardiff, and they've agreed that for 2019-20, where there's been an overspend, the council will be required to reimburse the service for that. So that's Cardiff. And where there's been an underspend, the monies will be returned. So that would be for Bridgend and the Vale, in line with the figures that you see in that table there. So just to notify committee that I've had those discussions with my colleagues, and they've both agreed that that's what they would wish to happen with the financial position for each of them as at the end of last year.
Thank you for that. I don't know if any members have any comments or queries. No? Okay. I don't know if
Chair, can I just conclude the report then? So I'm now at paragraph 2.65 towards the end of the report, and it's highlighting the challenges moving forward. We've already touched upon our capability to deliver the 2021 business plan. The bottom 2 bullet points then are about supporting the councils and other agencies to manage the impact of COVID-19. I will be frank with you, I really don't know what that means for us in the months ahead. We had some indication of it in March and April of the impact. I don't think we're going to go into a full lockdown again. I think there are lessons learned from last time, but the draw on the service is going to be significant. And the 3rd bullet point, and the one that is quietly challenging COVID for headlines, is the EU exit. and what that means, and the work that we have to do now with our business communities to make sure that COVID has damaged them significantly, that the EU exit regime doesn't do any more damage. We have a lot of people who export and import in this area, and Ellen's team and others will be key in making sure that they can continue their business across the next few months, and particularly on January 1st. So, Chair, that is the report. The recommendation will be that you agree and allow me then to go ahead and forward on the report to the heads of paid service at the other councils.
Okay, if there aren't any queries or comments on what you've heard today, I think it's well relayed out, and I think it's quite clear. Well, I always find the reports on this committee very clear, actually. So yeah, if I could have someone move the report, then please. Thank you. And second, lovely. Everyone's okay with that? Yeah. Great. Thank you very much. Should we move on to item 9 then, please? Which is the Shared Regulatory Service Food Law Enforcement Service Plan.
Right, Chair. So Christina hopefully is still on the call and will talk you through that.
I am indeed, and good morning everyone. Yeah, lovely to see you all. Before presenting the report, we have noticed 2 errors for the purpose of the minutes. Gareth, if we could note this and make amendments if possible, please. Yep. On the front cover of the report, the date of the meeting is actually down as Tuesday the 8th of September, which I believe was the previous arrangements before this meeting, and obviously the report cover hasn't been changed. So if we could note that, please. And the purpose of the report, it says to seek approval for the Health and Safety Enforcement Service Plan. Just to clarify, this is in fact the Food and Feed Enforcement Service Plan. So just for the purpose of the minutes to ensure accuracy on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, this the Food and Feed Law Enforcement Service Plan, we obviously do this every year. It's something that we bring to Joint Committee for you to be aware of in terms of the food and feed service and how we discharge our duties. We obviously have a duty to enforce food legislation, particularly in relation to food hygiene standards and feed law. And the Food Standards Agency Framework Agreement makes it relevant for us to set out and bring to Joint Committee how we discharge this function. You all know we obviously undertake intervention by means of inspections, dealing with complaints, conducting surveys, and of course taking enforcement action where necessary. Attached to the report in the appendix is the draft Food and Feed Law Service Plan for 2020-21, and this details how we fulfil our obligations, and of course sets a target for us then to achieve, which is in fact regulated by the Food Standards Agency. Our risk-based work programme, because of course, as you know, we start with the highest risk where we can enforce in, and obviously the lower risk category of enforcement is sort of our last to deal with. What you obviously need to be aware is the Food Standards Agency have set expectations upon us as a local authority, and set key targets for us to deliver in terms of an inspection programme. Obviously, when we wrote this service plan, a bit like the business plan that Dave has talked about, it was obviously at the start of the financial year, and we are in extremely difficult times. But of course, what we've done is drafted this report on the basis that COVID, of course, wasn't happening, and we would just be focusing on our inspection and intervention regime as usual. But of course, things have moved on. Staff have had to need to be displaced to do other things. And of course, the economy and our food businesses out there have been widely impacted, particularly at the beginning of lockdown, where of course some of our food premises weren't even open, and therefore not appropriate for us to be going and inspecting. That said, we are working closely with the Food Standards Agency, where very much going on their guidance in terms of the types of premises that we need to be focusing on. And at the moment, the priority are our higher risk premises, along with some of the new businesses, which we again seen that higher risk and adopting the high risk approach in relation to interventions. But of course, when we receive a complaint or areas of concern, the officers in the teams are obviously investigating and looking into those matters. In terms of the plan itself, as I said, it's contained in the appendix. I'm obviously not going to go through that document page by page because, of course, it's quite lengthy. Page 19 sets out our planned interventions, as I've said. However, we are obviously behind in terms of those interventions, and what happens with COVID will very much dictate what we can do. But of course, we are trying to protect public health and, of course, risk to food premises as best we can, and will act on intelligence in order to do that. Page 40 of the plan talks about our shortfall in staff, our staffing arrangements. The document enables us to say how many members of staff we think we need to conduct the service and the interventions, and then of course we have a slight shortfall of 4.52 FTE within the service. However, as always with the food service, recruitment does tend to be an issue. We do have a high turnover over staff, and that sometimes is because of the qualifications set out to enable officers to do that work, which is a bit more difficult in other areas of the service. And of course, we have some maternity covering arrangements going on at the moment, whereby, of course, you'll all be aware that I'm currently off on maternity leave. Some of the one of the team managers, Jane Petey, is covering my role, and of course we've enabled some of the staff on the ground then to step up as opportunities into the team manager position. So there's obviously a shortfall underneath some of those staffing arrangements, which will have an impact on what the service can achieve in terms of interventions. The section 6 of the plan obviously looks at performance against last year's plan. So the food law enforcement service plan that we brought to the Joint Committee, that sets out what we've done to achieve what we set out to do. As I said, the COVID issue did have an impact on what we could do. However, given the shortfall and the pressures that the staff were under, I think you'll all agree in saying that the staff have done extremely well in achieving what they have, and all credit to them in terms of the hard work that they've put in getting those interventions done, and of course the enforcement action that took place, which is fully detailed in the plan. The recommendation for this report, similar to the others, is of course to approve the 2020-21 Food and Feed Law Enforcement Plan, and again to authorise Dave as the head of Shared Regulatory Services to make administrative amendments should the need arise. Happy to take any questions or queries any of you may have on the report.
Thank you, Christina, and congratulations on having a baby. I can see that Norma has raised her hand. Councillor Mackie, would you like to ask your question, please?
I'm unmute again. Christina, yes, congratulations. Lovely news. And I was just wondering, with the EU changes and all that, whether that there is likely to be any further sort of food produce and things like that coming through our airport and ports, and whether, you know, we have, what are we putting in place maybe to look at that?
Thanks, Norma. Yes, very valid question there. Obviously Brexit was a little bit of the unknown for us. In terms of our ports, they are not actually designated to bring in high risk food produce. So at the moment, it's very much sort of low risk projects that are coming through. That said, we are working closely with Border Force and our colleagues at Cardiff Airport to ensure that we are prepared just in case that status is changing. And of course, any changes in legislation or practices that we need to adhere to, we're obviously keeping it in touch with the Food Standards Agency and putting the relevant processes in place However, as I said, because of the designated status of Cardiff Airport and the ports, not too much of a change for us in terms of Brexit. That said, they may go down that road, and of course we will need to make sure that we're up to date and change our procedures in order to facilitate that.
Oh, thanks for that. And another one, just on the COVID sort of issues, with a lot of premises struggling now, and I know within Cardiff we've had a lot of cafes and some pubs and clubs are actually closing down. If an awful lot of them do, what sort of impact is that going to have on our income coming into? And I know you might have extra resource free, maybe things, the inspections will need to be done, but you know, there's also an impact on monies coming in, I would imagine, as well.
Well, in terms of any new business opening or closing, that obviously does impact on our figures, because once one business closes and another one reopens, that of course is a further inspection for us to be done, and that is an issue for us with Cardiff, because of course there's such high turnover of those inspections, and of course it means that the amount of interventions that we need to do, amount of premises that we need to visit, will increase as a result. And of course with all the other COVID work that's going on, it's a further challenge for us in terms of reaching those figures and those targets for us. So that is a challenge. And of course, you know, the officers are conducting that other COVID work and ensuring that we're supporting local businesses in making the economy thrive and ensuring these new businesses are coming through. So there is an aspect there for us to help and advise them through, as well as inform. In terms of income for those new businesses, we're obviously not receiving any income for a new business starting up. Where we would receive some income is through Helen's area, where should we need to do paid for advice type strategies or activities for businesses, but that generally is the more set up businesses rather than new businesses. So it wouldn't affect our income in terms of we don't receive anything for a new business starting up. However, it does affect our figures, our targets, and of course the officer availability to go out and conduct an inspection at those premises.
Thank you.
Okay, don't know. Yeah, Councillor Eddie Williams.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting, isn't it? We were talking about the changing, the challenges and the times changing. I'm just curious as to the businesses out there. There hasn't been a drop in standard. I can see from the report there've been some successful prosecutions and things. So clearly the people are being picked up. But I'm just curious as to whether, even though we're not being able to meet all the business inspections, the actual concern is whether there's a drop in standards. Do you see that happening?
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Well, of course, we do still respond to complaints and any intelligence that we receive from the public. So where there are any concerns in relation to food hygiene standards, our officers are obviously still investigating and still carrying out the enforcement action as a result. Obviously, the high risk inspections that we're conducting, that would of course pick up any issues that we see out there. But of course, inspections are taking longer in that obviously the PPE issues and the way in which officers approach the inspection, particularly with those kitchens that are much smaller, maintaining those distances. Of course, I haven't been around for the last 10 weeks, but I'm advised by Jane, who's covering my role, that of course the team is still very busy. As you know, the food service is an exceptionally busy service in terms of the amount of work that needs to be done. There are still issues out there, but of course for us it's remaining relevant and encouraging consumers and so on to report matters of concern into us, and of course still getting those officers out to those high risk inspections to ensure that within our issues, we're observing and we're dealing with those very quickly and swiftly to resolve.
Thank you. From what you've got in the report, I can see that we're still maintaining the standards. So, the message is, in spite of the challenge, and you know, I would suggest the overworking of staff, we're still maintaining a safe environment. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis has got a question.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's in relation to dark kitchens, and that seems to be on the increase, and I think that is quite worrying. The fact that I'm aware of a couple of local hubs in the Bridgend area who have a lot of people advertising the sale of takeaways sort of thing. So obviously it's best to make people aware of this and advise them not to order over the internet.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Yes, of course, dark kitchens, even before COVID, was becoming more and more popular in terms of people becoming more entrepreneurial and setting up businesses from home. But of course, you would be amazed at the people not realising that they need to register with the local authority as a food business before starting up these type of ventures. So what we have done in order to police that issue is to set up our own Shared Regulatory Services Facebook page, where we can monitor who is advertising online, who's advertising those services, and to ensure that they have registered with us and of course received the relevant inspection to ensure that the correct standards are in place. So of course, COVID absolutely made people think about things in a different way. Obviously, the consumer landscape changed in terms of the way that we purchase food and the way in which we do things. And of course, people can operate quite safely from their home, as long as they, of course, have the correct measures and controls in place. So the message for us is that obviously anybody setting up these type of ventures need to get in touch with us, need to register and ensure that the relevant controls are in place to do so. But of course, you're quite right. We need to be obviously advising members of the public as well to check the Food Standards Agency website, ensure that those people advertising to sell food are in fact registered and have received an inspection, which will give them an idea of the type of food hygiene rating they've been given and the standards that are in place. But yes, Councillor Lewis, very much a different way of working, a different way of ordering food, and of course consumers are reacting and ordering in that way.
Thank you, Christina.
Chair, can I add to that as well?
Yeah.
Chris, you'll remember the interventions we had to make around the University Hospital of Wales, where a number of people were starting to make food and take it into the hospital for the staff, for patients, etc. And we had no traceability on hygiene issues or anything. So a number of interventions made during April, which was, you know, the height of the first wave, but officers were still out challenging those practices, Councillor, and we are going to go into a fairly steep second wave, and you know, just to give you some comfort that we did it last time and we will do all we can to do it this time around as well.
Thank you.
Can I just ask a question around laboratories and how the timescales are looking when we use those now, because obviously they're in high demand.
In terms of sampling, of course, at the moment, from what I understand, it's very much sort of low priority currently. It's only where absolutely necessary that sampling of food products is actually being done by the service. In a normal world, we obviously undertake projects and surveys. For example, the shopping basket survey, we looked at ice, for example, last year. But of course, at the moment, we are really concentrating on those high-risk interventions rather than conducting the sort of the additional survey work that we used to do that. So, of course, at the moment, there's very little in terms of sampling being done. Obviously, if things improve in terms of COVID, we will look to do that again. But I'm not envisaging, as things as they are, that we will be undertaking much sampling and submitting food stuff for analysis currently. I see that very much something that we'll be doing next financial year.
Thank you.
And again, Chair, to give you some comfort, the laboratory we use is in the north of Cardiff, and in the next report I'll be flagging with you how responsive they were when we put things of key importance. You know, we had next day turnaround. So again, if there is an issue, I'm reasonably comfortable we can get to a laboratory and get some results quickly to be able to intervene effectively.
That's good. Does anybody else have any comments or queries that they want to raise? No? Okay. Thank you, Christina. Christina's obviously said the recommendations, which are to approve the Food and Feed Law Enforcement Plan 2020-2021, and then also authorise the head of the Shared Regulatory Service to make any administrative amendments. Can I have someone move those recommendations, please? Thank you, and someone to second. Lovely, and everyone's okay with that because everyone's raised their hands. So thank you very much. Shall we move on to item 10, which is the overview and update of the Shared Regulatory Service? Please, Dave.
Yes, Chair. So this report reflects Q1, so that is from April 1st to 30th June. Obviously not in a position to report you fully on Q2 yet, but I will, some of what I say will probably wander into that. I'll start at paragraph 2 and just reflect on some of the human resources. Our attendance has been good, better than last year, so that's a good thing. And I would say that our officers have, you know, stepped up and at no personal risks, no lack of personal risk to themselves. I've intervened now, as you'll see, on some pretty disturbing practices that were happening through April, May and June. So on the HR front, we're okay. On the finance front, we do have an issue, and I alluded to it earlier on. The service at the moment is reporting a significant overspend. The current position there continues as a state of flux. Richard Price is leading this case. He's on the call. The timetable for a court determining this matter has slipped quite a lot. And I believe the next court date now is heading towards the end of November. So, Chair, I am going to convene a meeting away from this to properly understand the financial implications. I want to engage the committee to address the matter with the Welsh Government at a political level. And if with your blessing, Chair, I'd like to convene a separate meeting to this, to take this matter into more consideration. On performance monitoring, Chair, Appendix 2, you have the traditional tables. They don't make for good reading. As Christina has said, a number of the premises through Q1 were closed by requirement of the Welsh Government. So you will know from personal experience that you couldn't go out for meals, you couldn't go to restaurants, you couldn't go to pubs, they're all closed down. And the food chain was primarily being delivered through the supermarkets and corner shops. What I have done to try and give you a feel for some of the things we have been doing in Q1 is put an infographic in. I'm not quite sure on what page that is on your papers, but it is headed COVID Response Q1. And it shows you the number of service requests we'd received, how many warning letters we'd issued. Interestingly, noise and air complaints went up, and that's because everyone was at home and they could hear their neighbours, whereas normally they'd have been in work. We did a lot of work on business closures and then subsequently began to do a lot of work enabling them to reopen. You may not be aware that we actually controlled the number of bookings that hotels and caravan parks were able to take in Q1. Any hotel needed to have a local authority blessing to open and receive residents, and in the beginning it was down to key workers, and we challenged that process quite robustly. We had a lot of scammers exploiting things in April and May, people offering to spray down your house with a COVID disinfectant and spray your drive so you didn't walk it into your house. Price gouging, so exploiting different things. We were seeing things that were previously sold for £1, being sold for as much as £5. And we had to make some interventions. We have, I think I'm right in saying, 15,000 litres of hand sanitizer that doesn't do quite what it's supposed to do. And of course, as employers were saying, and the health authority was saying, social distancing is important, wash your hands important. The next line of defence, use hand sanitizers. And 15,000 litres is an awful lot of product that we are now sitting on that didn't do what it was supposed to do. Some of that was unfortunate purchasing, unfortunate labelling, but some of it was downright fraud perpetrated by some less scrupulous manufacturers. I make comment in the report, I touched on it earlier, about in Q1 we put a lot of resource into test, trace and protect, and we've put even more in now. And I do think the challenges faced by that scheme are quite significant. But to stress, we are supporting it across 2 health boards, which is an even a bigger challenge for us, I guess. We are working closely with care homes and schools, and Sarah Swaysland is a team manager in that team for communicable disease, highly regarded by all 3 council social services teams. But what we're also seeing now is more incidences of rhinovirus, norovirus, and all those other horrible little things that turn up as we go into autumn. So that team is under some significant pressure. The rest of the report, there is a communicable disease and port health plan in it, and there's a bit of a recurring theme here, isn't it? When we wrote that, we anticipated dealing with the norm, and COVID has almost taken over. But we have been instrumental in writing the local plans for Cardiff, the Vale and Bridgend. We've influenced the national coronavirus plan, which has been published, and we are at the heart of all these meetings that go on. Councillors will be aware that at different levels there have been interaction with the government to go into local restriction areas, and the SRS has been alongside the chief execs and leaders at all times, offering them advice on these matters. So very busy. There's also the health and safety statutory plan inside the update report. That function has also been turned off slightly, but we are still responding to accidents, and we've had a couple of serious issues that we are responding to and working with the HSE on. And then finally, in Appendix 6 is some of the recent cases, and you will be aware that while the courts went into a bit of a lockdown through March, April, May, they have started listening to the more serious cases, and I've been advising you of some of those. And we've had some good results, I have to say. The courts have been quite supportive of our work in the last 3 or 4 months, and we have seen some unscrupulous people going inside for a stretch. So hopefully they'll be safe from COVID in prison, but you know, some well-deserved cases there, and investigations by officers getting some real results. And I know that's cheered up the officers, because they've obviously been drawn away to do other things, and nice to see that their work has generated some good results. So, Chair, the report is really there for noting in the first instance, and then to ask you to approve the 2 plans, because we bring them to you on a regular basis, particularly the Section 18 plan for health and safety, because that is a statutory plan. I'll stop there, Chair. I don't know if there are going to be any questions.
Okay, do any members have any questions or comments? I can't see anyone's. Oh yeah, Norma, go on.
I just wanted to make a comment really about the amount of work that's gone on and is still going on. And I mean, it's just phenomenal, really. And even, you know, getting all these reports together is an achievement in itself, never mind the work behind it. And yeah, I mean, I think we need to sort of formally, you know, praise the staff and everything for the commitment, really, and the extra that they put in to get in us here, you know, and that was all really. I think we, you know, phenomenal work. Well done, everybody.
Thank you, Norma. I completely agree with you. I think Councillor Michael would like to say something as well.
Just to follow up what Norma said, I mean, the public are sort of preoccupied with their world, and we have the opportunity next week at scrutiny, when they scrutinise SRS, to actually remind them of the incredible work the staff have done for the last 7-8 months. People tend to read bits in the paper and accept that that's the headlines, but they really don't see the incredible amount of work that goes on in the background to make sure they are kept in a safe and secure place. So I think we should accept that opportunity next week, Dave, for the staff to laud their work and remind the committee of how important SRS is to this area and the incredible amount of work they do.
Absolutely agree with you. Councillor Lewis, please.
Yes, I'd just like to say well done on the work you do, and I think we should be looking to promote SRS more than we do, you know, and all of us should get out there and tell people what you actually do, because it's staggering, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis.
Chair, could I come back? And
yeah,
I would say over the last 6 months, certain premises are well aware of who the SRS are, because we've served lots of enforcement notices on them. But equally, you know, our work has taken us into contact with clerks of community councils, where they've been asking us about community centres and when they can open, what they can do, and the like. And the number of inquiries we had, and the different people that we've engaged with that perhaps we wouldn't normally, is indicative of how much this has impacted on us as communities. So, yeah, I think quietly people are understanding a bit more what we do. But I think Councillor Michael is right. Sometimes you get lost in your own bubble, don't you? And you can't have any bubbles now anymore. Sorry. So we stop those.
Thank you.
Stop with Norma. We got our own bubble.
Councillor Williams.
Yeah, can I move the report with the recommendation to recognise the staff's contribution to safety of the area? Thank you.
Yeah.
Second that.
And yeah, I've heard someone second that as well. And we just wanted to add into the recommendations about the separate meeting that Dave mentioned, and how we'd like political support. So I'd add that in as well into the recommendations.
Yeah, great.
Everyone okay with that? Yep. Okay, great. I feel it's been seconded and everyone's nodding along, so they're approving it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's that item. Thank you, everyone. Item 11 we've already covered as the urgent item. So I don't know if there's anything left for us to go over.
That's it from democratic perspective, unless Dave wants to raise anything.
Well, Chair, I'd just like to, you know, your appreciation of the officers is gratefully received. And I have to say the officers, you know, find the 6 committee members a great support. So I just sort of back at you a bit, you know, and I think the officers appreciate fully how much you do on their behalf as well in political circles.
Oh, thanks, Dave. I think everyone's smiling, so that's nice to see. Yeah, I think if that's well, everything that we've agendaed and spoke about, I guess I formally close the meeting. Thank you all for your time and contributions.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all. Thank you very much.
Bye.
See you all soon. Take care.
Yeah. Bye then.